Yes, yes, yes. Thank you all for joining our latest Unmuted podcast. My name is Peter Cattle. I'm a director at Free Speech Ireland, and I am also a visiting fellow at the Danube Institute in Budapest. And with us today is a very, very special guest, Mr. Graham Linehan. He's a five-time BAFTA award-winning comedy writer, and he's the creator of hit television series Father Ted, which I'm fairly sure many here are familiar with, as well as the IT Crowd. Now, on September 1st, he was arrested by five armed police officers outside Heathrow Airport in relation to tweets he made in the United States. He has long had issues regarding his freedom of speech in the United Kingdom, and we hope to talk to him about those issues as well as the state of free speech in the United Kingdom today. Mr. Linehan, thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thank you.
So, I
Be patient with me. This is about like the third space I've ever done.
No, not at all. Hopefully, we will avoid technical difficulties. But to the audience, if we do not, we apologize in advance. But first, I would really like to start off with going back to that day, to so your flight into the United Kingdom. Could you recount for us? I know you've done it in multiple interviews before, but could you recount for us what happened that day and how it affected you?
Sure. I can never sleep on planes, so I was as frazzled as I always am after a 10-hour flight. But I knew what was happening quite quickly. They called my name over the plane landed, but it didn't. They didn't let anyone stand up. And I, at that point, I was still clueless. I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. I wonder what's going on." And then they called my name out, and I knew immediately that something was happening. Uh, and I mean, I expected it because the last few months I'd spent in London, I had this feeling of impending doom whenever I was in the country because it's the place where it's like just lots of bad memories now. It's the place where I was. The UK is the place where I was when people initially turned their backs on me, and rather than anyone ever stepping in at any point in the 8 to 10 years that I've been fighting this nonsense, um, I actually got arrested. It was like it was the perfect ending really to my time in the UK.
And the officers were armed, if I'm correct saying, which for
Yeah.
any of our American listeners is highly unusual.
No, I have to correct you there. The thing is not in Heathrow Airport. They're always armed in Heathrow Airport. The thing that was unusual was there was five of them, and when I saw the guns, I didn't yet know that this was not specifically for me. So it was quite it was infuriating. It was absolutely infuriating, especially since I've been reporting the members of this criminal gang who have been targeting me for years. I've reported them many times, and the police have done nothing. Even today, uh, me, Kelly J, and Sharon Davis reported a Susie Green T-shirt that had all our names on it and crossed out, and underneath it said the dead names. And we reported that, and they investigated and said, "No, nothing wrong with that." So, I mean, we keep hearing two-tier justice, but it really is. And for some reason, and it's something I always try to use humor and often I was angry and the jokes didn't land as well as they should have, but I've been kind of trying to jolt people out of this kind of weird spell everyone seems to be under, where they just somehow think these men are women. And it always makes me laugh, because like some of them are not just men, but they, as I often say, they're the worst men. Like we see case after case. Excuse me, I got caught in my.
No, you're fine. But I
We
do
see
want to
case after
I
case
do
of.
want to
Sorry,
ask
I'll just
about
quickly
the
finish.
just I want to ask a bit more about the instance of today because you've been quite
Okay,
vocal on this issue and it is an issue
sure.
of major debate. But Like, what did they actually say to you when they took you off the plane? What did they say they were specifically concerned about?
Well, they just said there'd been a flag on my passport because no one could get in touch with me, I guess. Um, I think they must have been to my old address in London because they mentioned that. Uh, and yeah, it was just you're under arrest. You're under arrest for these streets. And I was so angry, because like when you're arrested for tweets that aren't even illegal on Twitter, that are not getting you banned on Twitter, then what is going on?
And
They've
and
decided.
these tweets you wrote, these were not actually edited, written, or posted while you were in the United Kingdom, were they? They were.
Again, that's a bit of a rumor that's been spreading about, but no, I was actually back. I think I couldn't. I'm not positive. I haven't been interested enough to check yet, but I think I was in London for a friend's wedding.
Mhm,
So I mean, there's no like, even on its own, with the bald fact of it,
mhm,
it's absurd. And these kind of other mitigating factors that have been mentioned are sort of irrelevant.
mhm,
I mean, as I say, Susie Green can sell a T-shirt, uh, uh, more or less telling people to kill me, Sharon Davis, Kelly J, and J.K. Rowling, and I tell a joke about punching men who shouldn't be in women's spaces in the balls, and all hell breaks loose. So it's basically it's just indicative of how the police have been used over the last few years. The activists know the police are terrified of being unwoke or uncool, so they use that, and it's a vulnerability that the police have, that they've just been playing with for about 8 years.
how have you seen the development of the policing approach to this sort of online content? I know we hear a lot about the so-called non-crime hate incidents. That's a big thing over there. Have you noticed things getting better or worse in the United
Well,
Kingdom in regards to speech?
I'm pretty sure there's a few under my name because I was banned from going, even though I was invited, I was banned from going to the Conservative Party conference one year.
Hmm.
And I've been invited by the Conservatives, so it was very odd that I couldn't get in. So I presume I have one of these things that Helen Joyce has been the victim of as well recently.
Hmm.
Um, it's not. It actually weirdly has got a little bit better because at least in the early days we never made the news, or if we did make the news, it was just a case of those terrible tariffs, and people forgot about it. But there were things like, oh, I can't remember who did it, but I think Susie Green reported Kelly J. Keane to the police. Another report they took seriously. Miranda Yardley, who is trans himself, or trans identified himself, he was reported to the police. Had to wait a year for his trial. If you can imagine how stressful
Hmm.
that would have been. And then the judge took one look at the case and threw it out within the day. So, but that doesn't matter to them. It was the year waiting for the case that they wanted out of it. They want to just make your life more difficult. And of course, a lot of these guys are, as I say, they're criminals. They also need anonymity to do what they do. So their dearest wish is to just shut you up about them, so they can go on, doing their nefarious deeds.
So it's the but like what was your interactions both this time, and I know there was ones previously, with the police in the UK, like were they cordial, were they slightly embarrassed by this, or were they very enthusiastic about enforcing the warrant regarding these speech issues?
They were slightly embarrassed, I think. They were delighted to have a celebrity in one of the cells. Um, uh, as far as I'm a celebrity. but it was I realized quite quickly after the first wave of anger had disappeared that there's nothing I could do. What's that word? Apparatchiks. Um, that's the other thing these guys are very good at doing. Because once you set the wheels of illegal action in motion, uh, everyone just has to fulfill it like they're, those marionettes inside clocks. They just have to do it. You have to go through the process. If they don't say no further action over my recent arrest, I'm going to have to go to court over those stupid tweets. One of which was complaining about homophobes and misogynists. So even though they're going to be humiliated in this court, they just dive in. It's the strangest thing.
Also, like again, I've gotten a couple of your details of your case wrong, so I want to make sure I ask you this question. My
Don't worry.
understanding is that you did have a short court date on this, and they had a condition where that was later dropped that you couldn't use X.
Yeah, that's right. Um, it was a bail condition. I didn't go to court or anything, but
Mhm.
yeah, one of the bail conditions was that I couldn't use X. But we just after a while we just ignored that because I think they changed it to. The funny thing they did was they changed it. They then changed it to I couldn't contact the victim. But there was no victim in the tweets. So we wrote to them and we said, which victim? Who are you talking about? Who can we not mention? And they wouldn't tell us. This is how Kafkaesque it became. They wouldn't tell us who the person was who we couldn't mention. So it was so absurd. We think the arrest was illegal. We're suing the police because of it. And we've just ignored the bail conditions because I think what they were trying to do was protect Lindsay Watson, who is the guy who's been behind most of these vexatious reports, acting on behalf
So,
of some of the most
like,
dangerous trans activists.
well, again, that's an opinion. I just want to emphasize that on our end. But do you talk to me about the aftermath? Like, did you receive much support inside the UK? What about Ireland? Did you get politicians talking to you? Like,
Not at all. Like in Ireland, Ireland's great because they pretend I don't exist. I mean, I saw just recently they stopped that woman from running for president, and that's just typical, really, of the way Ireland deals with things. Uh, I think England is bad, but I think Ireland is really bad at the moment in terms of freedom of speech. They just don't talk. It's classic priest stuff. They just don't talk about anything that makes them uncomfortable. So, but I'll tell you what was
mhm.
interesting. Not a single friend got in touch. Arthur Matthews, Neil, and no one from my old life got in touch to ask how I was and see if I was okay. So it's like that's kind of I'm so used to that it just made me laugh.
Apologies if this is slightly personal, but I'm right in saying you're just an Irish citizen. You don't hold any other citizenships. Were you offered any consular assistance from the Irish embassy in London?
No, nothing at all. No,
Nothing.
no,
Absolutely nothing.
no, no. It didn't even occur to me they would be in touch. It's yeah. I mean, the whole country it's terrified. I think it's kind of terrified of people finding out how self ID was kind of smuggled in. So it's important not to even notice when things like me being arrested happen. You know what I mean? So yeah, I wasn't expecting anything from Ireland at all. Once Ireland decided that I was a bigot, and I mean they didn't really decide, but a lot of like the Irish internet decided before they all fucked off to Blue Sky. Once they decided I was a bigot, I just disappeared from sight. There was Arthur and Arla Hanlon did a kind of anniversary Father Ted thing, and they didn't ask me to be on it, you know. So it's stuff like that. I've gone from being, you know, frustrated by. One thing it did do was once I wrote the piece about being arrested and going to the hospital and all that stuff. Everything exploded, and I
Mhm.
suddenly sort of popped into existence. If not for Ireland, then certainly for the UK and for America, and that was great because you know. The book, the book, people hide the book in bookshops and stuff like that. So, you know, the sales have shot up, which is great. And yeah, it's just been an odd experience, both terrible for those few days, or for the 24 hours that I was going through it. But after that, I'm so happy about it because it really opened up the discussion, and that's what I've been trying to do for years. I've been trying to open it up, and I've been trying to tell people, things like, one of I wouldn't call it my favorite fact about the Tavistock, but the youngest child in the Tavistock was 4 years old, and they were Irish, and Irish people have no idea, So the more I can do, whatever, I joke that I wish I'd been arrested sooner, but I do, it suddenly brought the issue into the light,
Yes, and just for those of us, or for those of you who have just joined us, we have Graham Lennon here, award-winning comedy writer, and we're discussing about freedom of speech in the UK and Ireland in the wake of the recent arrest. You can send us questions that you would like to issue to Graham through the account hosting this Spaces. And I would also like to point people towards our open letter to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Simon Harris, as well as the Irish Ambassador to Great Britain. Regarding offering consular assistance to Irish nationals in the United Kingdom who fall afoul of speech laws over there. And so, if you are an Irish citizen, please look at signing that for us. Graham, I want to ask you about the response more generally politically. I know probably one of the biggest ones was that the House Judiciary Committee hearing regarding speech laws in Europe and the United Kingdom, you were repeatedly brought up by a number of the congressmen.
Yeah.
So, like, how do you find that response? Do you think that the response from the United States and other organizations to support freedom of speech has been helpful, or do you think it hasn't had much of an impact as of yet?
No, I think it's really helpful for me because I don't want to go back to the UK. Don't want to go back to Ireland. The only reason I go back to Ireland is to see my mum and my sister and my
Yeah.
brother. I don't really, have any use for Ireland beyond that. Sort of disgusted at the way I was treated by Ireland. But like, so what it might mean is that my case uh, gets a bit more attention and doesn't get like put to the bottom of a pile when I apply here for longer citizenship, or not longer citizenship. What's the word? I don't know what the word is, but my visa at the moment is for 4 years. So I'm hoping to extend that to 10 at the moment, and I think it'll be. I don't think it'll be a problem with what's happened to me.
Mhm. Um, have you noticed a difference? You've been in the US for a little while now. Have you noticed a difference in attitudes from the individual people, or?
Oh no, like where I am, no, you have to be like a million times more famous to be famous in America. And luckily, I'm still pretty anonymous here, and that's the way I like it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What about the comedy space in the UK and Ireland right now? When I was growing up, which sadly isn't that long ago, it felt like there was a little bit more of an edge to
Yeah.
British and Irish comedy. Well, like
Oh
what's
yeah.
happened to them?
Well, I this has been a movement that has been, and Genevieve Gluck is here, and she'll be annoyed at me for this. I hope not too annoyed, but this has been a movement that has been primarily fought against by women, but also I have to say has been policed by women in certainly in workplaces and certainly in middle class industries like the theatre, publishing. media, press, whatever, academia. These are the places that are policed most viciously because they're liberal left wing spaces, and cancellation. Something to remember about cancellation is doesn't work on right wing people. Right wing people don't care. But on left wing people do care about being called a bigot. I that's the thing that made me initially fight against it so strongly. I was being called a bigot, and I wasn't a bigot, and I was trying to fight back against that. But unfortunately, the kind of comedy space, the all these different space, the art space certainly is ruled by trans maidens, as Judy Burchill calls them, who just put men ahead of women, on every issue, and with that, and also weirdly don't see these. White men are at the absolute bottom of the pile when it comes to these women. But if they put on a dress, it sort of magically transforms men in their eyes. It's another thing I find hilarious about this fight. Um, so you have a kind of not just a book, but at the very top. So trans-identified men are a sacred class again, in much the same way the priests used to be. You can't question them, you can't criticize them, you can't laugh about them. Um, so that makes for a comedy, uh, uh, very tame comedy scene. I heard a great story about a group of comedy writers who were in some sort of class where they were studying it or something, or just learning how to be a stand-up, and they did a kind of exhibition show, and they were told at the start, no making fun of trans, no punching down, and they were given a list of rules they had to apply. So they came out, and apparently all the women talked about their periods, and all the men talked about wanking. Like that's the comedy you get when you can't make fun of people, and I don't know. It's even the old Bernard Manning type jokes would be preferable to uh, this kind of dead, uh, uh, airless comedy scene, where you know we're supposed to get endless lectures about how brilliant drag queens are and stuff. So yeah, it's dead. It's dead in the UK. In America, it's in much better health because stand-up comics, I don't know. They're just as fooled by everyone else, or at least they avoid the issue because they don't understand it because no one understands it. But you can see that they're braver. They say they're not afraid to approach it, and it's just a much healthier scene over here.
And is there a willingness there? Is this a case of that a lot of comedy writers just keep their head below the parapet, or is this something they do really love Big Brother, and this is now something that they truly believe in, even if, in your opinion, the quality of the comedy that comes out of the UK actually suffers?
Oh well, I think they love it because basically, there's a story about, I think it was Samuel Delany, the science fiction writer. Someone said to him, someone put up their hand in a conference and said, most of 95% of science fiction is crap, and he said 95% of everything is crap, and basically, like in culture, there's always like a few geniuses or a few really talented people, and beneath that, there's a sort of level of mediocrity of people who like to do, for instance, panel game shows and stuff like this. Even though I've done a few in the past, but they live on panel game shows, which have that kind of same atmosphere as that gig where everyone was just talking about their genitals, and I just think that the media this has been a time of mediocrities. Who like you can see all the authors, all the children's authors who despise J.K. Rowling. She's a children's author. She's the most successful children's author in the world. They're probably insanely jealous, and finally, they have a chance to be quote unquote better than her. But it's in the kind of moral sphere. And I think they leap at it because these people, they they can't really get to where they want to go where they want to go through their talent alone. It's you have to see your enemies fall so you can climb just a little bit higher, by stepping on their corpses, So it rewards the least talented, most mediocre creators and artists, and you can see that reflected in the output of things like Disney over the last few years. While virtue signaling and sort of absurd ideas about race and reparations and sex and fucking the trans stuff, while those things take a hold, no one with any skill, like, you can't imagine David Mamet flourishing in this world.
Mm.
And I think he's having trouble getting things produced. I could be wrong, but there was a review in the New York Times of Glengarry Glen Ross, and the author complained that they're all using the N word and stuff like that, and no one's getting punished. It's like, what are you talking about? What do you think art is? You know. So
Mhm.
yeah, so it's a terrible time for art, and the only way out of it, I think, is, and again, this is something I bore myself with saying, but the punks have got to come along and kick out the hippies again, because I think more than anything, this is a kind of a return to a sort of hippie movement. I often see. This thing, be kind. Why can't you just be kind? It has the same flavor to me as all you need is love, and other slightly vacuous phrases from the hippie movement. And the worship of demented men reminds me of the way they used to let the Manson family just walk barefoot through their homes, not realizing how much danger they were in. So yeah, I think there's a lot of parallels to that. Um,
You've no, it's I can't help but think is, like, censorship, especially for comedians, has been a thing for quite a while. Like, you've repeatedly mentioned the priests in Ireland, and from my understanding, it's very true that Father Ted had some problems in Ireland when it was getting released. It eventually was published in the UK, not in Ireland. Um, has it
it
gotten
was what,
better?
sorry?
Has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse since then? And if it's gotten worse or better, why do you think it's any different than it used to be?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure whether you said it, but like, we never offered TED to Ireland. It always went straight to the to Channel 4, because they were the ones
Mhm.
who asked for it. But I don't really know what. All I know is that the comedy world in Ireland is policed really tightly by a bunch of virtue signaling twats, really. And all my comedy friends over there are constantly getting into trouble because they've crossed some arbitrary line or other. So it's yeah, I don't really pay attention much to the Irish scene, but I do know
Mhm.
it's in a bad way. And I think some good people, some very decent people, have been cancelled over there. There was a journalist who came after me in hot press, and he was cancelled on the word of someone who I know is a complete liar and fantasist, which is the woman who
Wait,
did.
yeah, well, hold on. This is, again, as you say, Ireland. You're probably also aware Ireland's defamation law is quite tough.
Okay,
So
okay,
I
okay.
do want to emphasize that we have to tread lightly on those sort of things. But
Yeah.
like, you talked about the punks. I want to get back to that idea of the punks in comedy. It's like, where do you think they should come from? Where do you think they could come from? Like, it seems quite locked down, at least in the mainstream sphere. Do you see a way out of this? Through the comedy route, or what do you think the future holds?
Uh, I don't know. I think the way AI is going to change creativity and make a kind of level of expertise in certain fields easier to achieve for people who don't have that expertise.
Mhm.
I think that's going to change a lot of things. I think that being able to make something in your bedroom, you might, I don't know if you will, but you might see lots more things like the South Park, South Park, which came originally from a 10-minute birthday card they sent out to people. And like, they by creating it themselves, by using the kind of animation they use, and so on and so forth, they were able to just ignore every single um, you know, so-called progressive ruling. So it was a little bit late, but they still did it. Their
Mhm.
brilliant take on women in sport, or trans women in sport. Men in women's sports. That was hilarious, and they don't seem to. It doesn't affect them. But not everyone is lucky enough to be in that sort of unassailable billionaire position. But
Mhm.
but I do think it's possibly easier to take those first steps for creators who just want to go around the system, and really around the system is the only way you can do it.
Mhm. And we've got a question from the audience here, and I'm just going to add a little bit to it at the end as well. Is what's the biggest difference, good or bad, since you moved to the United States? And what I want to add to that is what makes it so that there's such energy in the United States comedy scene? Because as you mentioned, with the likes of South Park, with the likes of Joe Rogan, there seems to be a bit of a battle going on within the US comedy scene. You've got the liberals, you've got the John Olivers on one side, but you also have this kind of countercultural movement on the other. And you can take one side or the other, but I'd argue it seems to make for a much more exciting and funny scene. So how did that come about? Do you have you detected any sort of um difference,
I,
essence that you can point towards?
yeah, first of all, they value free speech, like, because it's actually in the Constitution. There's no question of the police turning up at your door for writing some uh, uh, pungent tweets. Um, uh, that's just not on the table. And the other thing is, the thing that's really exploding over here, like everywhere else, it's really stand-up comedy. And the thing about stand-up comedy is the assets you need for stand-up comedy is you don't really need any. Unfortunately, I was in a position where I needed a whole crew and cast and agents, and all of those have been captured by this ideology. So it's impossible to get a crew together. But stand-up comedians, they can just get out there, tell the joke, and escape quickly. you know. Whereas if you're doing what I do, you have to kind of build up an infrastructure first before you can get to the comedy. So
Mhm.
in some ways, I'm still in a bit of a bind over here, but there's more opportunities. Uh, I do think I've said to people that if I can't make this sitcom through normal means, I'll make it doing every voice myself, and using a few AI coders to animate it. I mean, that's achievable. And it's very exciting. I think people are. I mean, I'm longing for the days when I can just talk about things like AI. But I think AI is a fascinating resource for people who don't have access to those assets. And sure, it's there's lots of grey areas, to say the least, about how people use it. But I think there's a way of using it creatively. Uh, when I wrote the piece about when I was arrested, that just
Mhm.
exploded. I did that by like I wrote that. That would normally a piece
Mhm.
like that would normally have taken me about a week to write. And I wrote that in a couple of hours using AI
Yeah.
to interview me and about the situation. I just basically told it everything that had happened, and it gave me an acceptable first draft that I was able to work on. So I think all of that it also has its dark side. Of course, you could have
Mhm.
porn deep fakes and all that sort of thing. But on the other side, you've got I don't know. I think it's going to be a brave new world in terms of art. And it is going to allow us to steer around these gatekeepers.
Well, talking about the gatekeepers, obviously, there's been a lot of concern about the Online Safety Act in the United Kingdom. Do you think that this recent incident involving yourself, this recent arrest, and the backlash that came from it. Do you think that might actually, start to move the dial a little bit in the United Kingdom and see this piece of legislation maybe soften?
Maybe, I don't know. Again, it all happened. I got out of England as soon as I could. I'm back in the States now, and paying attention through Twitter and things like that. But I do worry that the desire to shut people up in the UK and Ireland and everywhere else is sort of unstoppable. Sorry, in Europe actually, is sort of
Hmm.
unstoppable. They seem to want it no matter what. And I think the reason is they've swept so many problems beneath the rug that it's actually easier for them to arrest people pointing out the lumpy rug than it is to fix the lumpy rug. So I have a feeling the police might be entering into a new stage that we've seen the first ripples of, with people coming to people's doors and telling them to apologize for tweets and stuff like that. It feels like the police are now beginning to accept their job is sort of like a prison guard in an outside prison, and the whole world is the prison, you know. And it's very disturbing how quickly they've slipped into that. Again, I don't think it's the regular Bobby on the beat. I think the regular Bobby on the beat wants to catch bad guys, but they're being, as I say, pushed into activation. They're being activated by these strange men.
Just for those of you joining us here, I am interviewing Graham Linehan, award-winning comedian. If you have any questions for Graham, please send them directly to the Free Speech Ireland X account, the one that is hosting this podcast. Um, on that, I have another question regarding free speech in Europe. I know it's not your area of expertise, Graham, but have you heard anything about what is going on regarding comedy in Europe? Have you kept up to date in any way with the oppression of free speech there? And do you have any impression of what's going on?
Usually only through the feminists who are being arrested.
Hmm.
There was recently that Brazilian woman who had to leave her country and get asylum outside it because she annoyed the wrong trans-identified man. But that story is being played out everywhere. Like New Zealand. In New Zealand, they've just arrested a Maori woman for annoying a trans-identified man. And it's just every country. It's exactly the same playbook. They take advantage of the police not wanting to appear like right wing Dirty Harry types. Um, they wanna use this police force that's been covering itself in rainbow flags for the last 10 years because it was so traumatized by the McPherson report that it overcorrected. You know, and it just seems to be the way everywhere you go. And they never even pause. There's still no pause to say, hey, maybe these women are right. It just all plows forward because once you convince a liberal who doesn't think much about these things that this is the progressive way, they seem to just go all in. Um, so yeah, my interest is not so much in the free speech aspect. It's more in the aspect of you know women being victimized and everyone, all of us, being victimized. I've known teachers of autistic kids that can no longer teach because the trans activist got in touch with their employers. I know nurses who've been fired. There's Amy Ham in Canada, lost her job as a nurse. She was traumatized by that. Gillian Spencer in Australia, she's just been fired. Um, it's just an extraordinary thing, and I do think that if you are approaching the subject of free speech, I think if you approach it from women's point of view, you will see how bad it is a lot quicker than if you approach it from a male point of view. You know, because women have to say these things. It's actually a matter of survival, right? Because you're talking about single sex spaces, which God knows how many lives they've saved. And so, and nurses are on the front line. Nurses are the very ones you want to make sure believe in biology and believe that there's two sexes and so on. But all these are like frontline troops who are getting massacred first, and soon it'll move off the trans issue. It'll move on to any issue they want, know. And what we're seeing now is just how easy it is for them to operate, uh, harass ordinary people on behalf of some of the worst trolls online.
Hello.
I
Yeah, you're
worry
back
that
there.
yeah, I worry that we've let it go on so long that it's going to be hard to change that. But
Yeah. What like
go on.
I've got another question here about a lot of the vulnerable groups that you mentioned there. A lot of people, who are women, who, in these I don't want to call them vulnerable minority groups. I feel that's playing too much into stereotypes, but definitely people from groups that would be, have systemic challenges to their speech. It seems like they're frequently cut down by organizations that supposedly represent their interests.
Oh yeah,
What? Why?
yeah.
Why has that happened? How has that been allowed to happen?
Uh, I think it's. I'm not sure. I mean, well, I mean, I'll give you one example just to show you type of thing. But I think there's a group. Uh, I forget what they're called. I want to say Rock Against Racism, but it's not Rock Against Racism. It's something else. But it's an anti-racist group, and there was a hilarious video that went viral yesterday of a black woman trying to ask them questions, and all these white people had their backs turned to her. And so what I think it is that all of these woke progressive, I don't know what you want to call them, progressive movements, these shaming movements, they're full of white people and they're full of straight people. Like one of the worst things to happen to the gay community was the TQ being added onto it, because what that did in a single stroke was it added a lot of what we call spicy straights, just people who are straight with extra steps, like the Eurovision winner a few years ago. What was that couple's name?
Well, hang on now.
Uh,
Again,
the,
we'll
the,
we'll avoid names.
but they are. I don't. They don't make a secret of it. They. It's a man and a woman, a married man and woman, and they call themselves queer. And it's like once you take something that's very pure, like the LGB movement, it's very
Mhm.
precise and very specific, and you add letters to it that don't really mean anything. I've constantly asking people what transgender means, and I've never heard the same answer twice,
Mhm.
or queer, which is even worse. A slur that's being now used by white people to sort of elbow in at pride. Um, I just think that those kind of, once you put the opposite to what a group is into that group, it's poison to that group. And you've seen that attitudes have, as soon as people found out what the trans movement was actually about and what this latest phase of supposed queer or gay revolution actually is, people just don't like it. And unfortunately, they're associating these people with the LGB. So there's going to have to be something that happened when um, NAMBLA and who's the other group? PIE in the UK started trying to promote themselves. These were both paedophilic groups,
Well,
and
again, I,
this is crazy,
I,
man. This is all
I
historical. This is all historical, I promise. But PIE, the Paedophile Information Exchange, they operated for years with a lot of progressives, thinking that they were being really, what's the word? Progressive by supporting paedophiles.
well,
And it took a while, but then the gay movement rose up and rejected it and said, no, this is not what we're about. And so I think a necessary kind of similar thing has to happen with the TQ. You know.
That's a great jumping off point here, because I've gotten a number of questions sent into the account regarding what people can do as political solutions to this current crisis. Now, I would be irresponsible not to mention that we have our open letter that has just been published that you can sign if you're an Irish citizen, which is written to Minister for Foreign Affairs Simon Harris, as well as the Irish ambassador to London, demanding that they, among other things, support Irish people abroad who fall victim to anti-free speech legislation. I would also mention that if you are a resident in Ireland, that you can also donate to Free Speech Ireland. We are a organisation that operates with the help of a lot of volunteers. We are not well funded like most of the Irish NGO complex, so your support is greatly appreciated. But Graham, do you see, like, what can people do, in regards to actually, moving the dial here in terms of actually being able to openly speak their mind and openly question, and not just the trans issue. I know that's something you're passionate about, but there's a whole range of issues that have become very difficult to talk about, including free speech itself. What do you think people can do, or do you see any possible ways that they could really um, get
Well,
through to politicians, get through to civil society?
yeah, I think one way, I mean, I'm not just saying this because you invited me to speak, but one way is to join your local free speech, whatever local version of the free speech union you have. One thing politicians do apparently is when they look at a group that are contacting them, they check the Twitter followers and the social media followers. And the more people you have, the more seriously they're taken. So yeah, whatever country you're in, join your local chapter, and scare them a little bit, because at the moment people are so passive about having their rights taken away, uh, and I understand that because most people don't want to get involved in heated issues, you know. But at the same time, I think more and more people are realizing that when it gets to their hobby horse, they can't speak about that either. There's a famous piece about purity spirals, and the two places where they watched an absolutely some dreadful examples of that happening was young adult fiction and also a knitting circle. I think it was. It was like, or knitting fandom, you
Mhm.
know, and so and so that, this can happen to anyone, anywhere, over anything, and you're better in a group, you're stronger in a group, um, and the only other thing I'd say is if you could afford to, then speak dangerously and say the things they don't want you to say, and pretend you're getting onto a radio phone in about something else and then ambush them, because they do that to us often enough. Just get the unsayable out there, because the more, like, I mean, you've seen the effect. I think that one of the most revealing effects of the gender ideology movement is these policemen, MPs, who simply can't answer basic questions. They can't. You ask them to define a woman, and they can't do it. It's just extraordinary. So those moments are great, and those moments kind of show to the vast majority of people how insane the situation is. So I just say do whatever you can, like engineer those kinds of situations. Get in their nose, get up their noses, cause trouble for them.
Hmm.
Because and I don't mean that in an ugly or aggressive way. I just mean ask the questions that should be perfectly normal questions to ask in a country.
Exercise your free speech.
Yeah, and the country is going through various things that are extremely important and really need to be talked about. Like, I'm no expert on the immigration thing, but it's clear to everyone that there's a problem, and again, if the police are going to be used just to clear up people talking about the problem, then I don't know whether we'll come back from that. We'll all be living in V for Vendetta land before long.
And for maybe it's worth talking about corporations and businesses here, because we have quite a few people tuned in here, over 331 listeners. I'm sure some of them are either own a business or involved in a business, and especially those involved in the digital sphere, like X, like Meta, like TikTok. What can these organizations do to actually kind of help move the dial towards a more free speech, tilt? Like, what would you like to see from them? What would you like change? What would you like to see say the same?
I think it's as simple as fire your HR department, or change what they're about, so that the bar for going to HR is a lot higher. uh, I think that we've created a miserable world for ourselves, especially people who work in businesses and so on. A sort of panopticon where everyone is always looking over their shoulder. Everyone is always wondering if someone else is going to report them. And the thing I think people have found out about life, there's a great quote, I always think of it. I think it was Cardinal Richelieu uh, during the French Revolution. He said something along the lines of, hand me three letters by any man, and I will find something in them to destroy him. You know, and
Mhm,
that's true of all of us. We've all got something where we've been, I don't know, said the wrong thing at the wrong time, uh, did a stupid thing when we were younger. All these things, and what we've done is created a sort of evidence file around ourselves in the form of our uh, internet presence. You just
mhm,
got to be a lot more aware of things like that. You got to, like, one of the first things that happened to me was one of these bastards released my family's home address. That was because I was the writer of Father Ted, and there was I never thought my personal information being out there would be used against me. But of
mhm,
course, I turned into public enemy number one, and it was
mhm,
immediately used against me. So,
mhm,
so you got to just kind of batten down the hatches. If you're going to enter into a space where you're trying to tell the truth and trying to get the word out about whatever it is, just go through all your accounts online, double check everything, and make sure that you've not got any vulnerabilities. Um, Once you do that, and you sort of kind of get a second form of income sorted out, then you can start speaking out. But yeah, in terms of businesses, I'd say fire the HR department. The whole culture of HR is just a moralizing, finger wagging, uh, you know, uh, edifice that needs to be torn down. And it's the reason why, for instance, one episode of the IT Crowd has been banned by Channel Four. When they wrote to me about that, they just sent me a bunch of Stonewall cliches, that stuff that I knew wasn't true.
mhm,
You know, and yeah, you got to know your onions, know your subject, be like Charlie Kirk, I think. Because regardless of the fact that he and I would have disagreed on an issue like abortion,
mhm,
my God, he was well armed with facts. And
mhm.
he was polite, and he was generous to his opponents. Um, and I think, yeah, he's a great model.
Yeah.
Don't
How
go in not knowing your subject.
how how do we protect that? Obviously, you know, our thoughts and best wishes are with Charlie Kirk's family. But how do we protect, that kind of respectful but firm, very firm style of open debate? How do we protect that from people who want to harm it, either through cancellation or, unfortunately, as we've recently seen, violence and fatal violence in this case?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, that's an American problem.
Hmm.
The thing I always thought about, the thing I always admired about Charlie Kirk, the more I hear about him, is that someone pointed out that he himself would have seen his death as an acceptable cost for the Second Amendment. And I think you can't you can't get less hypocritical than that. That's like really standing by your beliefs. I'm sure he'd prefer to be alive,
Hmm.
and his family would,
Hmm.
but not to the extent of going against their own beliefs. And I think that's very admirable. Um, Uh, so I don't know how they're going to protect free speech over here. It's been made a little bit difficult, but there was a great quote I read recently that I really love, which said, "Even if you don't have free speech, act as if you do."
Hmm.
And that's what people are doing. The Turning Point have my boss Rob Schneider is going out to do Turning Point events, and there's millions of them sprouting up all over the country. And this is in a country where they recently polled students, and 42% said violence was acceptable against people who said things they found unpleasant. So it's not just acting as if you have free speech. It's incredible bravery in the face of people who would kill you for
Hmm.
exercising it. So I think that's the thing. You be brave. You lead by example. You do exactly what you know the people who went to Charlie's service over the weekend have been doing,
Hmm.
reacting with prayers and love and hope that your enemies uh, you know see the light or whatever. I think that those are incredibly admirable qualities. Even if I'm not Christian, I can admire them, the way they've been comporting themselves over the last couple of weeks. Um, and I think that is the answer. You just go out in good faith. You keep treating the debate as a debate worth having. You keep saying the unsayable,
Hmm.
and yeah, you act as if you do have free speech.
Hmm. And in terms of winning people over, actually finding that middle ground, what have you found works right now, or do you think that we're actually polarizing so rapidly as a society that that's got increasingly difficult?
I think our main enemy is and this is in every country, is in
Hmm.
legacy media. Legacy
Hmm.
media is unprepared to have the conversations that need to be had. They're
Hmm.
scared of them. They put guardrails around them, and as a result, you can't really talk about things like, one of the things that happened to me early on in this is I went on to Newsnight, and they gave me 5 minutes and barked at me while I was trying to talk about children being hurt in gender clinics. Um, that's what they do. That's the only way they get. None of them are across their brief. None of them understand the issues, so they bark. And the thing to do is to find ways around that. And I think there's more and more happening. Start a YouTube channel. YouTube is now a little bit freer. They're going to put people back on who they chucked off in the past. That's the easiest thing in the world. You just need a webcam. Most computers come with one attached. So, there's sort of no excuse for putting yourself out there. And you can build an audience quite quickly, I think, by saying the things that no one else will say.
Hmm.
And it will make the legacy media more and more irrelevant. Like, it was very funny. I don't know, but the whole thing of Paddy Kilty saying you can say whatever the fuck you want in Ireland, and we all wrote to him and said, well, when am I on? When am I on, Paddy? When is Helen Joyce on? or,
Hmm.
or anyone you've been ignoring for the last 10 years.
Hmm.
And the way that Ireland continues is the way it always continued is through embarrassment and not wanting to bring up uncomfortable things at the dinner table. Uh, we've just got to break through that. And one of the reasons why I'm, combative on Twitter is
Hmm.
because you've got to lead by example and say, there's no reason why someone sending you a rape threat, why you shouldn't be able to tell them to fuck off. There's
Hmm.
no reason why anyone should put up with these guys. So, you know, as I say, just act as if you have free speech and
Hmm.
fight back.
Hmm. Um, we've still gotten a load of questions sent in, but we are actually unfortunately ran out of time. So I apologize to anyone that we
Do you
have
want to
not
do a
gotten.
quick fire? Do you
We
want to do a quick fire
we
few?
we can do a quick fire. I'll see
Yeah.
if we can pick out two questions. Anyone, this will be your last chance. If you have any more questions, please send them into the account. We can do a quick fire. I'll start with my last question, and then we'll do a very quick fire round, and I will send. I'll just tell you all about the other Free Speech Ireland stuff, and then we'll finish it up. So, what I wanted to ask is if everyone here, if there's one thing you'd like them to walk away from this space is knowing or having heard? What is it?
Gosh, I, I I would just, if people come away realizing that the water is actually at their chin, it's not at their knees. The water is at their chin. This has been going on for we've been fighting this for 10 years. Me and the sorry, I say me as if I'm the most important, but like the so-called turfs and their allies that I would include myself in. We've been fighting this for 10 years. We've had women thrown into prison cells, women losing their jobs. It's not just that we need to fight against it, but we need to reinstate all those people in their jobs. They need to receive apologies from the people who smeared them, and yeah, there's not. I think there needs to be something like a sort of truth and reconciliation process to get past all this, because it wasn't until recently that I realized I'm just one story in thousands. Thousands of I know so many people, game designers, nurses, social workers, who've lost their jobs because of this kind of movement, this kind of anti-free speech movement, and yeah, just look to them, look to the people who who've been cancelled, and reach out to them, and you know start to try and undo the damage of what's been done over the last 10 years, because it's not just a question of stopping it, it's a question of undoing the damage you know
Hmm. Okay, I'm getting a list now of the quickfire questions. The first one is:
Okay.
I want to get into the mainstream comedy circuit, but I am fearful it is impossible with my views. Should I keep trying or should I just go my own way?
I would say i would say go your own way. I would say see if you can get a pub or somewhere that will put you on, where you don't have to depend on the circuit to sort of build your act and to gain confidence. Um, Look at, maybe you have a friend of a friend who runs a space that you can use. And also, just go online, go on YouTube, and start making money that way. A lot of comedians, they seem to be their main income seems to come from podcasts and so on. So there's nothing. I mean, there is definitely an argument that there's a few too many podcasts in the world, but
We
it's still a
apologize.
good way of it's still a good way of getting the message out there. So just be your own boss and get out there somehow. And try and just skip around the gatekeepers of the comedy industry, especially in Ireland.
Okay, next one. Do you think of Charlie Kirk as a free speech hero, or are you afraid that MAGA may be making too much of his recent deaths?
Uh, no, I don't think you can get more. Like, as I said, this was a man who was symbolized most in the microphone, you
Hmm.
know, and he not only did he speak fearlessly, but he would put the microphone down somewhat fearlessly, because he was so confident in his ability to debate that he didn't need to interrupt people. You
Hmm.
know, I don't think you can get more of a free speech hero than that. And I
Hmm.
think MAGA are exactly right to you know to make him into a free speech hero. Who else would you say is a free speech hero than Charlie Kirk, who's shot for it? I
I
I, I
couldn't have phrased it better myself.
yeah, yeah.
Now a fan has snuck in apparently. Which was more fun to make, the IT Crowd or Father Ted, or was it another production that was your favorite?
The easiest thing to make was Count Arthur Strong, which no one has seen, and I really hope people take a chance to search it out, because there's some episodes that are just as good as anything I ever did in any of the other shows. But of those two, Father Ted, because it was a shared duty writing it, and I was kind of tapping into Arthur's sense of humor, which was so unusual and easy for me to understand and add my own stuff to. Um, he brought all the expertise on priests, because he had a few uncles who were priests and so on, and I just loved it. I loved living in that world. It'll. I think it'll probably be the thing I'm most remembered for. So, I'm perfectly happy with that. Even though it happened early on in my career.
Mhm. Okay, and I think this is the last one. Ask Graham what would he like us to do for him.
Oh, the way I feel like a productive person is through my Substack. So just join my Substack. A paid subscription helps because I do pay my writers,
Hmm.
um, and it is still my only form of income at the moment. So yeah, Substack and for me, I mean, yeah, that's enough. That makes me feel like I'm earning a living rather than begging for one.
And what's do you have a URL for the Substack?
It's called the Glinner Update. So if you just search for that, you'll find it. It'll be under the 10 results telling you not to read it.
Okay, that's a great way to end it, I think. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Graham Linehan, for joining us, award-winning comedian.
Not at all.
A few bit of parish news. As I've said before, we have an open letter to Minister Simon Harris, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, as well as the ambassador to the United Kingdom in London, urging them to support people who fall victim of UK freedom of speech laws, as well as people who fall victim or Irish people who fall victim to freedom of speech laws more generally while they're abroad. So please, if you're an Irish citizen, please think about signing that. It is on our Twitter. As well, please, if you're an
Well,
Irish resident,
put,
consider donating
put
to
my
Free
name
Speech.
at the top of that. Put my name at the top of that if you like.
Please, yeah, please sign. Please sign it. We will send it on to you later. It is on our Twitter. If you have time, please retweet it and get as many people to sign it. Your mother, your father. I'd recommend your cat, but I don't think we're allowed to have a cat signature, even if they are an Irish resident. Also, please donations. Our organisation is heavily reliant on the support that you guys have given us. So to you that you have been donating, especially those who've been donating regularly, thank you very, very, very much. For those of you who haven't, please follow us on Twitter, follow us on all our socials. We have a YouTube as well. And thank you all for joining in. And again, thank you very much, Mr. Graham Linehan.
Thank you.
All right, that will be us. Thank you very much, guys. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Bye.